Welcome to another episode of Things That Matter. My name is Josh Taransky. This is Pastor Brian Brodersen of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. It's great to be with you. I don't know if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, but somehow you're tuning in, and we'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment below or whatever way you comment on whatever platform you're watching on. It is a blessing to have you out there in the audience, and we would love to hear from you. Today, we're going to talk about the decrease in the influence of Christians within culture. There was a
Good
that
way to
was that laid out there
describe
well?
that. Yeah, you did
Okay.
that well.
So in 2014, Barna did a study, and one of the things that he found within just 7 years was that over 6% of the U.S. population would identify themselves, or there was an increase of 6% of the nuns. So there was a jump in those who affiliated with that category of, look, I'm atheist, agnostic, whatever.
Yeah.
And so with that, there's this, new sense that, wow, Christianity has less and less of an influence culturally.
Yeah.
So you're a pastor. You've been a pastor for many, many years.
Yeah.
And what do you say to these things?
Well, I've always thought that the statistics were ridiculous. When you hear like 70% of America are Christians, you're like,
Yeah.
what America are you talking about? Not the one I'm living in. That's a joke. So, but of course, what it is, it's people who identify with a Christian denomination.
Yeah.
But look, most people that do that are not actual Christians in the biblical sense. So, these statistics don't really concern me, honestly. From the beginning of the country's foundation, there was obviously a Judeo-Christian influence on the culture in certain areas, for sure. And yeah, some of that is certainly slipping. Some of that is changing with the, more liberal political agenda, the so-called progressives, fighting against kind of the traditional views of family and sexuality and so forth, which all of them are connected back to the Judeo-Christian worldview on things. But as far as, but I don't know that ever did anything to bring anybody to Christ in the first place.
Right.
When I first became a Christian, and a few years later, I became a Christian in the mid to late 70s. And then in the 80s, we went into the Reagan era, and Reagan really did make America great. He did. And, there was a restoration of conservatism. And then suddenly, there was the rise of the moral majority and so forth. And suddenly you started hearing this, that, America is a Christian nation. I don't remember ever hearing that before that time. And I certainly never thought that. I mean, growing up in my America, with my immediate family, my family was Catholic, but that didn't really translate into anything ultra spiritual. We were partying and raising heck and doing everything just like everybody else was. So when I started to hear this thing like, this is a Christian country and so forth, I thought, wow, I never knew that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
So the people that are
growing up in it.
responding to Barna on this study, they're feeling a new freedom to be more honest.
Yeah, to just say, maybe I was baptized as a kid or whatever, but that doesn't, no, I don't embrace that.
Yeah.
So again, to me, I'm not really concerned about those statistics, because what we want to see is people genuinely come to faith in Christ, and that's always going to be somewhat of a minority.
Yeah.
The Bible tells us we're going to be a minority. Influence, well, again, like I said, what kind of influence are we talking about? If you're talking about institutional influence, yeah, Christianity is not influencing institutionally, maybe, but I don't know that it ever did.
Yeah.
In a really biblical kind of a way. So the influence that we want to have is an influence on people's lives individually, who then can impact their world, their business, their profession, and that might very well be somebody in a political position, or somebody in a position of law enforcement or whatever.
Yeah.
But the influence has to really be an influence for Christ, not just for some traditional sort of Christianity, Christendom. You know?
So there are people that are watching Christians being pushed more and more out of the public square. And Christians are more being mocked more in media and having less of a voice. It's almost like if you say you're a Christian, it almost undercuts your credibility than adds to your credibility. But there are some mistakes that people make in response to that. What would you say are some of the dangers?
Well, first of all, I think that that's kind of overstated. I think that, I think there's still plenty of Christians that have a voice in the culture, and they're, and yes, there's more ridicule than there has been in the past. There's more freedom on the part of people to just come right out and openly mock Christianity. That is true, but I don't know that just because that's true, that it doesn't mean that Christians aren't able to have a voice in the culture. I still think Christians do have a voice in the culture, and I think that, again, maybe in some ways it's even a better voice because it's disassociating from the institutionalized version of it, and it's just getting back to a real, personal, gospel-centered message around the person of Jesus. And that helps to clear up a lot of the misconceptions that have come when you kind of, you tie the church to the state in any way, shape, or form. You dilute it. You mess up the message. So, so I hear, of course, I have a background in ministry in Europe. I lived in Europe. And one of the big things that I've always heard is like, oh, Europe is post-Christian. All of those cathedrals are empty. Nobody goes to church anymore. Granted, the cathedrals, for the most part, are empty. Yes, they are. They're kind of museums now. But you know what? There's all kinds of industrial buildings that are full of people worshiping Jesus. So just because the mainline denominations of maybe, let's say, Lutheranism or, the Reformed churches of Europe or even the Anglican Church, just because you have maybe a majority of Anglicans no longer attending church, or the Anglican churches are empty, there's plenty of Christians in these places. They're just not meeting in those locations, and their Christianity isn't under that traditional denominational banner. So I think that's the mistake, to look at the mainline denominations and to judge Christianity by the demise of those mainline denominations, because as they have diminished in their effectiveness over the years, because of course they, to a large degree, departed from biblical truth, God's just moved into different areas and he's working in different places.
So what you're essentially saying is don't buy the hype and get discouraged from doing ministry or speaking out or being a witness for Christ.
Because you read stuff all the time, and of course, if you're on social media, you read all kinds of crazy things about what's going on. But to a large degree, I see that God is, God opens doors, and we've got all kinds of ministry going on in places where people say, "Oh, Christians can't do that anymore. Christians can't go there anymore. Christians can't say that anymore." Well, I know a bunch of Christians that are just doing all the stuff that people say they aren't or can't do. So to me, it's like, okay, these stats might be, they might be interesting to some extent, but let's not let them govern what we do.
I mean, because his stats is that 78% of the U.S. Identifies as a Christian in some way or another. There's no way.
There's absolutely no way. I mean, no way ever. I mean, that's a ridiculous statistic. It's nominal Christianity that they're identifying with, which is nominal Christianity has always been the problem throughout all of history. When people talk about the Crusades and all of that stuff, well, if there was any Christianity involved in it, it was a nominal Christianity. It was something on the surface that was more political. It never really penetrated the heart. It certainly never did what Jesus said to do. It wasn't about the gospel.
Well, I think this is really important because, and I think it matters, because...
of course, because we only talk about things that matter.
That's right. But if you are on social media and you do buy into the hype, then the knee-jerk reaction is maybe even to shout louder, to try to get your voice out there. But if you operate from a position of, no, this is just hype, there are open doors that exist there, then you can kind of relax and just walk through the doors culturally that God opens up for you.
Yeah, you have to do that. And you have to realize that the context of the New Testament is opposition, persecution. That was the normal experience for the apostolic church. And so when those things start to maybe, become more of an issue for us, instead of sort of whining about it, we just need to say, like, well, of course, what else would we expect? This is what the Bible tells us to expect the entire time. Jesus said, if they have received me, they'll receive you. If they've rejected me, they'll reject you. So this is nothing new.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Things That Matter. We'd love to hear from you. You can tweet us. You can comment on Facebook where you're watching this. Also, leave a comment on YouTube. We will read those. And if you have questions, you can post those as well. Again, my name is Josh Turansky. This is Pastor Brian Brodersen. We appreciate you tuning in today. God bless.